like this, that when Allah is mentioned, your heart trembles? That when the ayat of Allah are recited, then what happens? Your iman increases, you're motivated to obey. If you are, then everything that comes from Allah and His Messenger, you will accept it. Even if it is the matter with regards to the distribution of the booty, you will accept it. Because the true believers are those who, when the ayat of Allah are recited, they increase in their iman. And they also trust upon Allah, even with regards to the matters of money. For example, sometimes if there's a difference of opinion between husband and wife, or between family members, between friends, over money, over financial issues, they begin arguing with one another. But what do they need to do? They need to make sure that their akhlaq is good while they are discussing. And at the same time, they must have trust upon Allah, that Allah is my raziq. Why should I argue with another person, waste my good deeds, just because I fear that if I don't, I will lose on this opportunity to obtain money? Trust upon Allah, because He is your provider. The believers are those who trust upon Him. They give the haqq of Allah, and they also give the haqq of people. And it is such who are true believers, and it is such who will have degrees in the hereafter, and forgiveness and mercy. Now in the following ayat, we learn about the Battle of Badr. So basically in the following ayat, the review of the Battle of Badr begins. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ يَعِدُكُمُ اللَّهُ. Remember, O believers, when Allah had promised you. وَإِذْ, meaning وَذْكُرْ is. When Allah had promised you, O Muslims, what? إِحْدَى الطَّائِفَتَيْنِ, one of the two groups. الطَّائِفَتَيْنِ is a dual of الطَّائِفَة. And who does the two groups refer to? The two groups of the mushrikeen. That either you will confront the mushrik army and you will have victory over them, or you will catch up with the caravan of the mushrikeen and you will be able to raid or plunder or whatever. So, وَإِذْ يَعِدُكُمُ اللَّهُ إِحْدَى الطَّائِفَتَيْنِ, when Allah promised you one of the two groups of the mushrikeen, that أَنَّهَا لَكُمْ, that indeed it is for you, that you will counter it and overpower it. You will be victorious over one. Not both, but one. وَتَوَدُّونَ, and you were wishing at that time, when you were promised one of the two groups of the mushrikeen, you, O believers, you were wishing that أَنَّ, that indeed غَيْرَ ذَاتِ الشَّوْكَةِ, that indeed the one that is not the possessor of thorns, تَكُونُ لَكُمْ, it is for you. What does it mean by this? غَيْرَ ذَاتِ الشَّوْكَةِ. Ash-shawka is from the root letters shin, waw, kaf. And shawk is used for a thorn, a spike. And from this the word is used for a sharp weapon. What is it used for? A sharp weapon. Any kind of weapon. Whether it is a dagger or a sword or an arrow. Why? Because generally, weapons are sharp. They're pointy. And that is shawka, the possessor of weapons, meaning one that is armed. غَيْرَ ذَاتِ الشَّوْكَةِ, one that is not armed. So you, O Muslims, were wishing that you should encounter which group of the mushrikeen? The one that is not armed. So which one is that? The caravan and not the army. That's what you wanted. Why? Because it had fewer men, there were very few people, and the benefit was more. Wasn't it? The benefit was more. وَيُرِيدُ اللَّهُ, but Allah had another purpose. And what was that purpose? What did Allah want? أَن يُحِقَّ الْحَقَّ, that He proves the truth true, بِكَلِمَاتِهِ, with His words. وَيَقْطَعَ دَابِرَ الْكَافِرِينَ, and He wished to cut off the root of the disbelievers. He wished to exterminate them. This was the purpose as to why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought you out of your homes. Not so that you go back home with a lot of money. No. The reason why Allah brought you out of your homes was so that He can prove the truth true, and at the same time He can also defeat the disbelievers. What does it mean by this? يُحِقَّ الْحَقَّ بِكَلِمَاتِهِ. Meaning he wanted to prove the truthfulness of the truth. Yuhiqqa. Ahaqqa yuhiqqu is to prove something as true. To show the truthfulness of something. What does haqq refer to? Islam. What the Prophet ﷺ was preaching. So Allah wished to prove the truth true. How? By making it victorious. And that could only be possible if the Muslims fought the mushrik enemy, the mushrik army, and they were victorious over them. If the Muslims had encountered the caravan, and let's say they managed to get everything from the caravan, but would that prove the truthfulness of Islam? No, because there isn't really an element of victory. But when a mushrik force comes facing the Muslim army, and then the Muslim army is victorious, then what does that show? The truthfulness of the believers. So يُحِقَّ الْحَقَّ بِكَلِمَاتِهِ. And kalimat over here refers to the signs. Which signs? Which were shown in the midst of the battle. That how the Muslims were so few in number, 300. And the mushrikeen on the other hand were 3 times their number. Similarly, many things happened during the battle. For instance, the rain which fell down, which was very beneficial for the Muslims, but at the same time very harmful for the mushrik army. So all of these were signs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed, which proved the truthfulness of Islam. وَيَقْطَعَ, and at the same time He wished to eradicate the dabir al-kafirin, the root of the disbelievers. What does it mean by dabir? The extreme part of something, the last part of something. So in other words, He wished to exterminate even the last of them. He wished to cut off the root of the disbelievers so that the very last man is finished. And how was that done? That their leaders, the main leaders of the mushrikeen, they were brought to the battlefield and they were finished. Now sometimes things happen and it seems as though there is no sense behind them. You think that they are completely counterproductive, they seem to have no benefit. Instead, they seem to be going against you. They don't seem favorable at all. And they're not even easy at the same time. Whatever is happening is not even easy. It seems so difficult, it seems so impossible, unrealistic, and you're wondering, why is it happening? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has another plan in it for you. If you think of it, realistically, where there are 300 Muslims only, very few in number, and if you see the benefit, where is more benefit? In attacking the caravan. That's more logical. Go and attack the caravan, you're only 300. You will gain so much money, and in the future, inshallah, you'll be able to counter the enemy with more force. Because you will have accumulated all of this money. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has another plan. He has another plan. So when things don't go your way, when you want them to go your way, and they seem to be more better in front of you, then remember that Allah has another plan. We are short-sighted. We only see that which is before us. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has another plan. So what do we need to do in such situations? That we need to submit ourselves to the decree of Allah. And we need to be patient. At these times generally, we become very impatient. We begin arguing with others. We start showing anger. And we say, that's it, I'm not working with you anymore. You're being very illogical. I cannot tolerate this anymore. I'm leaving. This is impatience. And this is frustration that is being shown towards the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even if a person does show that frustration, is that going to change anything? No. So, what is the best way? That when things happen which are beyond your control, know that there is a wisdom behind that. There is some wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala behind that. We learned that the Prophet ﷺ, he went towards the battlefield with 313 Sahaba. 313. And they were not even well equipped. They were not well equipped at all. It is said that the Muslims, they had a total of 70 camels. Just imagine 313 people. How many camels do they have? 70. And they had 2 horses only. So 70 camels and 2 horses. And the Sahaba, they would ride these camels and horses by turns. So for some time, one person would be riding the camel, another person would be walking. And then they would switch spots. So this is how they traveled from Medina towards Badr. And it is said that there was nothing to distinguish between the soldiers from the captains. From the eminent companions, like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and Umar radiallahu anhu as well. Everyone was the same. Generally what happens, we want everything to be proper. People who are in authority, they should be wearing a specific uniform. And if they don't have it, we feel so bad. We want everything to be nice and proper and set nicely. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has another plan. Allah is not limited to these logistics, to these little details. He doesn't care about them. لِيُحِقَّ الْحَقَّ, that He should establish the truth. Meaning, why did all of this happen? Why did He want you to counter the army? So that He would prove the truth true. He would establish the truth. That who is really upon the truth? Is it the believers or is it the mushrikeen? وَيُبْطِلَ الْبَاطِلِ, and He wished to abolish falsehood. Yubtila, it is to render something void. It is to prove something as false, to nullify it. So yubtil al-batil. The batil, the untruth of disbelief, of polytheism, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wished to completely abolish that. وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُجْرِمُونَ, even if the criminals, they dislike it. Even if they don't want it to happen. Who does the mujrimun refer to? The mushrikeen. Meaning, even if they don't like the fact that the Muslims are victorious, that the truth should be established, that falsehood should be abolished, even then, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to execute His plan. Now we see over here, وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُجْرِمُونَ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a certain plan, and He is going to execute it. No one can stop Him at all. No matter how much people dislike it. No matter how much people hate it. No matter how much resistance they show. Still, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to execute His plan. So what is the solution in that for us? That we must accept the decree of Allah. We must accept the will of Allah. Because if we don't and we dislike the decree of Allah, then what is that? It's not going to change anything. Whatever Allah wishes to happen is definitely going to happen. We learned in the previous surah, in Surah Al-A'raf, that there were so many nations were mentioned. And how they behaved towards their prophets. And what happened eventually? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed each and every one of them. And who was saved? The believers were saved. But Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the last messenger. He was the last messenger. And now establishing the truth was something that was necessary. Because there was no other messenger who was going to come afterwards. With the previous nations, if the people disbelieved, eventually they were destroyed, they were finished. But over here, if the mushrikeen were destroyed, if the opponents of the Prophet ﷺ, if they were finished, okay, the falsehood would be finished. But the truth had to be established. People had to accept the truth. They had to see the truth rise and be established. And for this reason, the mushrikeen were not destroyed by a punishment from the sky or the earth. But rather they were destroyed at the hands of who? At the Muslims. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wished should happen. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted that should happen. Now, I'll just mention a few incidents which led to the battle, and also with regards to how the Prophet ﷺ went from pursuing the caravan to the battle of Uhud, fighting the enemy. We learned that when the Prophet ﷺ, he left Medina, he headed towards Badr. And remember when the believers, when they left Medina, why did they leave? In order to pursue the caravan. They had no idea that the mushrikeen army would come, and they would have to face a battle. So they went towards Badr, which was on the coastal route from Syria to Mecca. So by the sea, from Syria to Mecca, Badr was on the way. Why did he go there? Because Abu Sufyan was coming from Syria and he was heading towards Mecca. And he was going to pass by Badr at some point. So the Prophet ﷺ wished to go there and intercept the caravan at that place, at Badr. Meanwhile, what happened? Abu Sufyan, he found out that the Prophet ﷺ was heading there as well. So what did Abu Sufyan do? He sent news to Makkah that send an army to rescue your caravan. And the news came to the Prophet ﷺ that the Quraysh had set out with an army to rescue their caravan. The Prophet ﷺ also found out. Now, at this point, the Prophet ﷺ summoned his companions and he asked them for their advice. Why? In order to mentally prepare them. Because the Sahaba had left Medina in hopes of getting hold of the caravan. And now all of a sudden, the Prophet ﷺ found out that there is a caravan, and at the same time there's also an army that is approaching. So the Sahaba had to be prepared. So the Prophet ﷺ took their advice. And he really wanted to make sure that the Ansar of Medina, they were willing to support him. Why? Because the contract that they had made with the Ansar, it obliged the Ansar to protect the Prophet ﷺ in Medina and not outside of Medina. You understand? It was only in Medina and not outside of Medina. It did not compel them to take part in any military expedition outside their territory. So what happened? The Prophet ﷺ informed the Muhajirin and the Ansar of the situation, and he said, what do you say about this? What should we do? The Muhajirun, they responded first and they assured the Prophet ﷺ of their help and loyalty. But the Prophet ﷺ repeated his appeal, that what do you have to say? And the Muhajirun again, they replied with a similar reply. And then the Prophet ﷺ repeated again. So eventually the Ansar, they understood that we are the ones who are being questioned. That are we going to support the Prophet ﷺ or not? So at that, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, he immediately got up and he said that, O Prophet of Allah, it appears that the question is directed to us and you want to have our answer. Perhaps you think, O Prophet of Allah, that the Ansar have offered to help you in their own territory only. I want to tell you on behalf of the Ansar that you may lead us wherever you like. You can take us wherever you want. You can align with whom you may desire or break relations with whom you may think fit. You may take whatever you desire from our property and give us as much as you want, for whatever you would take from our property would be dearer to us than what you would leave for us. We will follow whatever you command us to do. By Allah, if you go ahead until you reach Barq Ghidman, we will accompany you, a far off distant place. If you tell us to go there, we will accompany you. And by Allah, if you march into the sea, we will also do that with you. So at this point, the loyalty of the Sahaba, it was proven. That how loyal they were to the Prophet ﷺ, to his mission, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that although they were not obliged to assist the Prophet ﷺ over here, if the Muslims were to counter the mushrik army, but still they showed their loyalty and they said, whatever you say, we are with you. And Ibn Mas'ud radhiyallahu anhu, later on he said, that I was a witness to something that Al-Miqdad ibn al-Aswad did. That I would like more than almost anything else to have been the one who did it. Meaning, I wish I had said that. Al-Miqdad came to the Prophet ﷺ while he was invoking Allah against the mushrikeen, and he proclaimed that, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we will not say as the people of Musa said. What did the people of Musa alayhi salam say? فَاذْهَبْ أَنْتَ وَرَبُّكَ فَقَاتِلَ إِنَّا هَاهُنَا قَاعِدُونَ. That you and your Lord go fight and we are sitting right here. We are not going to say that to you. Rather, we will fight to your right, to your left, before you and behind you. Meaning we are with you. And Ibn Mas'ud radhiyallahu anhu said that when the Prophet ﷺ heard this, I saw his face beaming with pleasure because of what Al-Miqdad had said. So this shows the wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ. That he didn't just make the decision himself and say that, okay, you just have to do it because I'm your leader and I commanded you. No, he mentally prepared them. That what do you have to say? What do you think we should do? We left Medina to pursue the caravan, but now we find out that there is an army coming. Now either we have to face the caravan or the army, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us one of the two. So what do you think we should do? Are you going to be with me or not? And all of them, they agreed to accompany the Prophet ﷺ and support him. Earlier we learned that there were some people who were yujadiluna, they were arguing with the Prophet ﷺ. Now, these were some people, and their reaction is mentioned over here. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, there were some other people who also differed with the Prophet ﷺ with regards to going for battle after having left to pursue the caravan, because they were unprepared for it, mentally as well as physically. However, the leaders amongst them, especially some Sahaba, they were more than willing. And the ones who are mentioned over here, they're the leaders. So if they were giving their support, then others should have followed. And they set an example for other people as well. So what happened then? Abu Sufyan, he found out that the Muslim army was coming. And what did he do meanwhile? He sent Damdam to Makkah to send a message to the Makkans in order to send an army to rescue the caravan. So now, when Abu Sufyan was approaching Badr, he left the caravan behind and he went himself forward to see if there was any sign of the Muslims. And he went there and he asked some people who resided in that area if they had seen any strangers. And they had said that yes, we saw two strange men. They came and they were talking and they left. And Abu Sufyan knew that they were definitely Muslims. And he saw some camel dung and he picked it up and he crumpled it and he saw date pits in it, which showed him that they had come from where? Medina. So what did Abu Sufyan do? He turned his caravan toward the seacoast. He changed his route. He didn't go towards Badr. And at the same time, he also sent word to the Quraysh army who was approaching Badr, who had left Makkah. He sent word to them that he was at a safe distance from the Muslims. He had now changed his route and he should reach Makkah very soon. He should be safe. So he told the Meccan army, go back home, as it was no longer essential for them to proceed ahead. But what happened? The Meccans, many of them, they also wanted to return home. But Abu Jahl, he insisted to charge ahead in order to punish the Muslims. He wanted to take revenge from them. And especially when they found out that we are 1,000 and there are only 300, and that within those 1,000 mushrikeen, there were so many leaders amongst them, so many great fighters amongst them, they didn't want to go back home. And they said, we are definitely going to fight the Muslims. So now, it was clear to the Prophet ﷺ that who were they going to come into contact with? The mushrik army. Why? Because Abu Sufyan had escaped, and now these mushrikeen are coming, the army is coming, and that is the group of the mushrikeen that they were to face. Now we learned that when the Prophet ﷺ, he reached Badr, he camped over there, and at that place, he camped by the water, by the wells of Badr. And over there we learned that two men, they came to collect water. And the Muslims, they caught them, because they were strangers, so they caught them. And they asked them that, who are you collecting this water for? They said, we have come to collect water for the Meccan army. And the Prophet ﷺ asked them that how many are they? He said, many. Many. There are many of them. And they couldn't give them a number. So the Prophet ﷺ asked them that how many camels do they slaughter every day to feed their army? He said, on average 9 to 10. So just imagine 9 to 10 camels are being slaughtered every single day to just feed the army. Imagine how scared the Muslims must have been. Just imagine. 300 with 70 camels, 2 horses, barely enough to eat, and there is an army that is 3 times their number who are slaughtering 9 to 10 camels every day to just feed the army. And the Prophet ﷺ asked those two men as to who had come along with the mushrikeen, who was in the army. And those two men mentioned some of the names of the great leaders of Makkah, for instance, Abu Jahl. So the Prophet ﷺ remarked that Makkah has thrown unto you the best morsels of its liver. Meaning the best amongst the Makkans, they have come. So at this point, it was quite evident to the Muslims that they were to fight the army and not the caravan. So they began praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِذْ تَسْتَغِيثُونَ رَبَّكُمْ. Remember when you asked help of your Lord, when you were praying to your Lord. فَاسْتَجَابَ لَكُمْ. Then He responded to you, He answered you that أَنِّي مُمِدُّكُمْ بِأَلْفٍ مِّنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ مُرْدِفِينَ. Indeed, I will reinforce you with 1,000 from the angels, following one another. One after the other, these angels are going to come to assist you. When did this happen? When it was quite clear to the Muslims that they were going to fight the enemy. And they realized the size of the army, and how well off they were, how well equipped they were. So is تستغيثون. تستغيثون is from the root letters غين, ya, sa. The word غيث is literally used for rain. What does it mean? Rain. And istighatha is to seek for rain, to pray for rain, to pray for water. And just imagine a people who are struck by drought, or a person who is extremely thirsty. Extremely thirsty. How would he pray? How would he request for water? How? With a lot of desperation. So from this istighatha is to pray for anything, but with a lot of earnestness, with desperation. So istastaghithuna rabbakum. You are praying to your Lord. For what? For help, for assistance, for victory. فَاسْتَجَابَ لَكُمْ. So Allah accepted your dua, and He didn't just accept, but He also told you as to how He was going to help you. He responded to you that أَنِّي مُمِدُّكُمْ. Mumid is from the root letters mim, dal, dal, and mad is literally to extend. Mumid is one who extends. And remember that it also gives a sense of one who reinforces. Because mad is to extend, to stretch. So it is to reinforce, to help, to assist the means of someone, that they have limited resources, so you reinforce their resources so that their resources are extended. So Allah responded to you that I am going to reinforce you bi-alfin, with 1,000 min al-malaika, angels that are murdifin. Murdifin is a plural of murdif, from the root letters ra, dal, fa. Ra, dal, fa. And radif is to be under someone and be obedient to them. What does it mean? To be under someone and be obedient to them. And from this murdif is used for a follower, one who comes after the other. Because only when one has submitted to the other and is obedient to them, only then he will follow. Isn't it so? So murdif is one who comes after the other. Murdifin, coming one after the other. Back to back. One rank following the next. One rank of angels, one group of angels, one troop of angels, followed by the next. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised the Muslim. We learn that in Al-Bukhari, it is reported that Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he said that on the day of Badr, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed, "Istastaghithuna rabbakum." So he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that, "O Allah, I invoke you for your covenant and promise." Which covenant and promise? Of help, of victory. "O Allah, if you decide so," meaning, if you decide that we should be defeated, you will not be worshipped. Meaning, if these group of 300 Muslims are finished today, and I am the last messenger, then what's going to happen? What's going to happen? No one is going to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anymore. No one. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he held the Prophet's hand and he said, "Enough." I mean, he comforted the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went out proclaiming, "Sayuhzamul jam'u wa yuwalluna ad-dubur." Their multitude will be put to flight and they will show their back. Surah Al-Qamar, ayah 45. So he read an ayah that although they're huge in numbers, it's a whole jamr of them. It's a multitude of the mushrikeen that has come. But soon they will be put to flight. We learned that before the battle, the Prophet ﷺ prayed for a long time. A long time before the battle. And then a light slumber came upon him. So he slept for a little while. And when he woke up, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was by him. So he said to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu that, "Be happy, O Abu Bakr. The help of Allah has come. Here is Jibreel, and in his hand is the rein of a horse which he is leading, and he is armed for war." So the Prophet ﷺ was informed. He prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he was informed that the angels are coming to assist you. So he told Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu before the battle that here is Jibreel. It is also said the Prophet ﷺ prayed that, "O Allah, if you were to exterminate this small group of Muslims, you will not be worshipped on earth anymore." And in a state of extreme exaltation, his hands raised in prayer, and he was bent on his knees, and he supplicated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, "O Allah, fulfill what you have promised me. Help us, O Allah." And he was so lost in the prayer, in making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the mantle, the sheet on his shoulder, it fell to the ground. Tastaghithuna, remember? Istighatha is to pray with a lot of earnestness. So he was praying with so much devotion, with so much humility, with desperation, that he didn't even realize that the sheet that was on his shoulder, the garment that was on his shoulder, it fell to the ground. And he had his arms raised up and his knees on the ground, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he was also by the Prophet ﷺ and became distressed seeing the Prophet ﷺ in that state. تَسْتَغِيثُونَ رَبَّكُمْ. So when the Prophet of Allah prayed in this way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded. In difficult situations, what do? We go to people. We begin complaining. We ask this one for help, we ask another for help, and we forget to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. True believers are those who trust upon Allah, who know that if Allah has brought them to a particular situation, He will make them go through it. He will. Because they are unable, and they realize their weakness. And they realize the weakness of others even. And they realize the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we are in a difficult situation, instead of praying to Allah, we turn to others. But the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed to Allah. He's not panicking. He's showing his concern before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And look at his concern. It's not for his own safety and well-being. If you look at the dua, what did he say? That, "Oh Allah, if you wish, you will not be worshipped afterwards." Meaning, if we are finished, yes, it will be shahada for us. It will be martyrdom for us. However, what about the deen? What about the purpose for which people were created? And sometimes we have to look beyond ourselves. We have to look beyond ourselves. We have to look at the mission. That why are we here? What's our purpose? Why are we doing what we are doing? Is it only for ourselves, or is it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So the way he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he was also responded. And Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala supported His Prophet and the believers with 1,000 angels. 1,000 angels. 500 under the leadership of Jibreel on one side, and 500 under the leadership of Mikael on another side. So they were sent murdifin, one after the other. We also learn that Jibreel, he came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him, later on, after the battle, that how honored are those who participated in Badr among you? Those people who participated in the battle of Badr among you, how honorable are they? Jibreel said to Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Min afdal al-Muslimin." They are amongst the best Muslims. Yes, they're honorable, and they're amongst the best believers. So Jibreel said, this is the case with the angels who participated in Badr as well. The angels even whom Allah sent, they're the best of angels. Best of angels. They're the ones whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to assist the believers. We also learned that in Sahih Muslim it is recorded that Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he said, that Umar radiallahu anhu said that while a Muslim man was pursuing a mushrik during the battle of Badr, he heard the sound of a whip above him. He heard the sound of a whip above him, and a rider saying, "Come, O Hayzoom." And Hayzoom is the name of the horse. Then he looked at the mushrik who had fallen to the ground. And when he looked, he found that the idolater's nose had a wound, and his face was torn apart, whereas he himself had not hit him. He himself had not hit him. So later on, he came to the Prophet ﷺ and told him what had happened, and the Prophet ﷺ said, "You have said the truth. That was from the reinforcements from the third heaven." Meaning that was the angels who were assisting you. So we see that literally, it wasn't that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just told the Muslims to lift up their morale, to boost them up. No. Literally the angels were sent and they fought in the battle to defend the Muslims. وَمَا جَعَلَهُ اللَّهُ, and Allah made it not, إِلَّا بُشْرَى, except as good news. Meaning, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed the Muslims, before the battle actually began, that the angels were going to be sent to assist them, that was only to give them good news. Good news of what? Of the help of Allah. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could also have not informed them. But He informed them. And He didn't inform them during the battle or after the battle, but He informed them before the battle. So He made this as a good news for the Muslims. وَمَا جَعَلَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بُشْرًا وَلِتَطْمَئِنَّ بِهِ قُلُوبُكُمْ, and so that your hearts become satisfied. Your hearts become reassured. And تطمئن, itmi'nan, is to become satisfied, to become content. And basically, itmi'nan literally is to come to rest after severe tremors, after severe movement. So just imagine what fears the believers must have been experiencing up until this point. And now when they found out that the angels are coming to assist us, just imagine the comfort and the rest and the contentment that they must have found in their hearts. وَلِتَطْمَئِنَّ بِهِ قُلُوبُكُمْ وَمَا النَّصْرُ, and help is not إِلَّا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ, except from Allah. Over here the believers are being ensured that the victory, the help that you have acquired, it has come from who? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not by your numbers, not the fact that you were very skillful, or you were very alert, or you were very careful, but rather the help, the victory has come to you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not because of your numbers, not because of your resources, not because of the reinforcements even of the angels. However, the help has come from who? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, you should depend on Him. Inna Allaha azizun hakim. Indeed, Allah is mighty and He's also wise. How is He mighty and wise? That if Allah wishes to execute a matter, He is capable. He is aziz. None can stop Him. If He wishes to send angels, He can do that. If He wishes to assist you, even though you're very weak and few, He can do that. And He is hakim. How? That He knows how to test you. He is wise in the manner that He tests you, in the manner that He helps you, in the manner that He brought you out from Medina and made you face the mushrik army. Because just imagine if the Muslims were told, while they were in Medina, go and fight the mushrik army. Would they leave? No. Would they go willingly? Perhaps not. It would be extremely difficult. But look at the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How they were brought out of Medina, how the situation changed, and then they were made to face the mushrik army. All of these events, what do they show? The wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's listen to the recitation of these verses.